the approach I wanted to take was to first off have you take a look at, if you haven't been to the meeting agenda item, there's 2 documents on there. If you could pull them both up, and we'll have them both up on the board here. I'd like to actually go with this. I think it's. Hold on one moment. Yeah, that's the one I want to do first. So that's the one I want to do first. There's 2. The first part of this is I just want to kind of give you some background on what the audit committee has been doing in terms of the structure of the audit organization. We've been talking about this for many, many months. We have both the committee. We've met with Dr. Garza and Susan Quinn have been part of those conversations, and Teresa and Chris as well, our audit staff members. The committee has looked at different options. We spent time this morning, again, further looking at options. We spent probably the most amount of time last Tuesday going through not only kind of our individual kind of perspectives, but we actually looked at a number of other organizations around the country and how they structure their audit departments. We passed that information. I think we made that information available to the board. It's multiple documents, actually. And we kind of boiled that down into, and I thank Ms. McLaughlin for kind of the vision for this, and Teresa for making it happen. We boiled that down into the next few pages that are on the document that are up on the screen now. And the first one was, the first one is LI Unified School District. This is kind of their audit structure. I don't know, maybe Teresa, it might be helpful to take a few minutes and kind of briefly explain what those different boxes mean. We'll go through, I think there's 4 or 5 of them here, and then we'll back into what our current structure is and what the county structure is. And then we would lastly like to talk about what our initial conversations took us to regarding the organization of the audit office. The audit committee is not ready to make a recommendation today. We really need one more meeting, I think, to kind of finalize that. We have a number of elements that we want to have some discussion about and make some kind of decisions about in terms of recommendations to the board. The key part of that is we wanted to hear Chairman Bulova this morning and kind of their perspective on public members and just kind of how they're structured. So, but we'll at least give you our thinking up till now. Then we wanted to spend as much time as you all want to spend talking or discussing, dialoguing about what it is you may or may not want to see. And then from this conversation and the next audit committee meeting, we would then make some sort of recommendation and then bring that back to the board. Part of what we're trying to do is conclude our work before next Thursday's meeting, where we would expect that the committee membership could change. And if so, then we at least would have kind of at least have finished one part of our work, and then the next committee can take it from there. They can either agree or disagree with whatever we've done, but at least we would have had some preliminary conclusion to this work that we've been tasked with and we've been working on all year. So with that, Teresa, if you can just give us a kind of just a brief overview of what those different and some perspective of the organizations themselves.
Okay. What you have here is, with the exception of the first page, Fairfax County Government and Fairfax County Schools.
If your microphone could be pulled a little bit more over to you so we can make sure we record it and they can hear you, that'd be great.
With the exception of page 1, which is the county and us, you have 4 large school districts: LA Unified School District, Dallas ISD, Miami-Dade County, and Palm Beach County, Palm Beach, Florida. Starting with the governing bodies on top, in general, what I'm showing you is from the governing body down through the Auditor General, IG, their audit committee structure, if it is known, and what they have reporting to them. For example, if we just take LA Unified School District, which is the first one at the top, you see from the Board of Education, they have an Inspector General. That Inspector General reports directly to the Board of Education. Under the Inspector General, there are 3 units: a supervising investigator who has investigators under him, Deputy Inspector General of Contracts, his staff is listed under him, and Deputy Inspector General of Internal Audit with audit managers, principal auditors, etc. The same format flows for all of these, not necessarily the same titles. I'm not as concerned about the titles of the position. as much as we are about how they are structured and put together and what their actual function is. The quality assurance control and administrative budget support, those positions are named something different in each case. Those are internal to the actual audit itself, the office, the Inspector General office. That quality control and assurance is their quality control process over their work, not quality control over their organization. So that's specific to internal in their particular organization. Similar to Dallas ISD, if you flip the page or go to the next page, you have Miami-Dade County. That's a very large audit office. They have the school board, the chief auditor reports directly to the school board, indirectly to the audit and budget committee. That's a management and compliance audit office, and they report to an audit budget committee. That's a dual committee, very large committee, as you can see. 3 chief or assistant chief auditors, different functions, schools, districts, and then investigations with staff under each of them. And the last page is Palm Beach. Similar structure. You have the school board with an audit committee, the inspector general reporting directly to the school board, indirectly to the audit committee. Underneath the inspector general, you have some differing pieces here. You have a senior attorney, you have an executive secretary. View. Oh, it's not going to rotate for you. Tools? No, it's not going to rotate there either.
Not in the view tool. View and then tool. Yeah, the board does, so I can't go back into the agenda.
Just turn this way.
Turn the head sideways. What you have is the school board. Reporting directly to the school board is the inspector general. Reporting directly to the inspector general, going down the audit roles, you have an audit, director of audit, and underneath that you have financial and compliance audits with staff, performance audits, contract oversight with staff. Also reporting to inspector general, you have investigations, the director of investigations with investigators. You have a third component, compliance and quality control. Again, that is compliance and quality control within the office that also handles those groups or those services that they offer to the division as a whole. They might do some outreach or some training in that area. But what's unique about Palm Beach is they also have an attorney and an executive secretary in there. The one thing to keep in mind when you're reviewing each of these, all of the jurisdictions serve the same roles that we do, but they all fall under different state statutes and state codes, which may impact the duties and authorities of each of these offices. Some have taxing authority, some have subpoena authority. What we're looking at in terms of our structure, I think, in my opinion, if we focus on structure and not on titles, we can then go back and figure out where we want the work to be, because the titles that you see here may not mean the same thing for us. But that's kind of a general overview of what each of these show. It's just a basic org chart.
Yeah, and I would echo too that some have had issues in their organizations that really have necessitated the need to have more vibrant audit processes and staffing, et cetera. So there's obviously needs can vary among the organizations, and this is done really to give you a sense. There are a number of other ones we took a look at, but these were kind of captured, I think, some of the basic ideas. So if we can go to the first page now, which is the page for for Fairfax County and our existing audit structure, that'd be great. So no, that's not it. You have to go to the first page of the other document. Yeah, that one there. Just go to that first page of that one. And Sharon Bova this morning was walking through, yeah, it's that document, then you have to go to page 1 of that, yeah. Right at the top is, just stay right there at the top. The Fairfax County government, Sharon spent some time this morning walking through what their organization was, and for those of you who didn't have an opportunity to hear her, there is some information on the back counter there which she passed out, which I'd be happy to do the same here. But the core of that is about a little over 20 years ago, there was some discussion, and they ultimately decided to have an audit function in addition to the Director of Internal Audit that reports to the county executive. If you look at this, you'll see on the right side the county executive. Underneath the county executive, directly reporting to him, is a Director of Internal Audit. So they have their audit function reporting directly to Ed Long and the county executive offices. So you have a financial area just like we have, but in this case you have a separate audit function that then goes to the county executive. In addition to that kind of internal audit that they have, they, again, about 20 years ago, and Sharon kind of gave us the background on kind of where that came from and why, they decided to implement a audit function. It's, I would say, more of a potential efficiency and evaluation or performance audit function, which could also include financial audits, but the core of what at least she presented to us today seemed to be more performance-based focus to it. But it's really anything that they would want to task the audit committee and the auditor that reports to the board, the audit committee and could do. The Board of Supervisors has in essence, have a work plan that's approved by them, that's the audit committee initiates. The audit committee meets quarterly and again tasks the auditor to the board and any staff reporting to the auditor to the board, and they then report back. Some of the audits that they have done, I will actually have a copy of. I'll just send these around. That, again, for those of you who weren't able to come this morning, these are some of the things that Sharon kind of passed out as examples of this audit committee and this auditor to the board's work. That's their existing structure. So they really have two kind of separate audit areas. One reports internally to the county executive on it's more of a financial audit, and the other is more of you could call it an inspector general or a general auditor, but that essentially a performance audit, or it could be financial, that goes then through the audit committee and the Board of Supervisors. Our existing function is right below that. Thank you. This is what we currently have for the board, for the school board. We have a school board, we have an audit committee. The audit committee is responsible in our governance manual for supervising the school board auditor. The school board auditor the school board audit shop has within it Teresa Weatherman and her staff, which includes I forget how many we are now. Auditor two, 4 auditors total. And we have a number of interns, which were here this morning, which we got a chance to meet.
4 auditors.
Oh, with Chris, okay. So that is our existing function that you see right there. So the discussion that we were having then as a committee is, okay, where do we go now? What do we want to do different? We did this comprehensive risk assessment, which we did first because we wanted to understand better what our true needs were as a system. That risk assessment came back. We talked about that at our last work session as a board, and obviously the audit committee has been talking about it, and we identified a number of kind of priority risks. We then met a week ago, Tuesday, to try to distill all the conversations we've been having into some potential recommendations to the board. And so I now want to go to these potential recommendations because we're not ready to recommend them yet. So that's on the other document. KP, if you could put that up. Okay. Yeah, that's it. This is essentially the work that we did last Tuesday, and I'll start with the information on the left side of the screen called defining the work. Defining the work. Really all the people were present, which included Megan and Janie and myself, Dr. Garza and Susan Quinn and Teresa Weatherman and Chris as well. That we kind of all looked at the different things that we do, and we made a list of what are all the different potential work that this group, this organization could do. The first and foremost we decided, obviously, was the financial. It's a very traditional part of what we do. Financial audits, performance audits, and benchmarking, which we all recognize is an important part of effective management. And those could be efficiency and effectiveness benchmarkings, quality assurance kind of benchmarking. We have the traditional kind of inspector general waste, fraud, and abuse issues, That's number 3. Number 4 was general investigations and complaints. That could include anything from equity and compliance, what our own existing equity and compliance office does now in HR, to really any part of the organization where we would need or potentially need to do that kind of work. Program evaluation, which again we do now through, I just got Dr. Ricardo, thank you. His name was missing. Ricardo's office does that now, program evaluation work. We then have the risk assessment work, which we just concluded, which we know that on an annual basis, at a minimum, we need to be updating and kind of taking a look at that, as well as managing that process to make sure that we're actually reducing those risks. And then special projects, which could be almost anything. Those are all the potential areas that we saw. We didn't necessarily think they all belonged in the school board audit committee's office, but we viewed them as areas that this school board audit office could consider or even look at. Whether it's done at a 30,000-foot level or at a 10,000-foot level really would remain to be seen, but those were the ones we identified. And then on the right side, the far right side, you see source of work. And the key part of that was we view this as a system. And the way this board does its work, the way it should do its work, is we identified work to be done. We have an annual approved plan, which this board has been doing for the audit committee for some time. And we had within that those projects or those activities that should be part of this plan that the audit committee essentially would be tasked to monitor on behalf of the board and report out to the board on those functions. So you see special projects, you see traditional audits, program evaluations, operational efficiency and effectiveness, risk assessment, enterprise-wide, as well as prioritization of which ones should go up and which ones should go down in that risk assessment. And then anything beyond that would be a board-approved ad hoc work. So again, anything that would be done would be board-approved, not individual approved, not audit committee approved, but board-approved. So we took those two different pieces and we said, okay, how do you bring together a system that would enable you to ultimately manage this work? We came up with two basic kinds of options, and we are not recommending either one of these. I'll add that again. We're not recommending either one of these. We're not recommending either one of these. These are just some initial, things that we said, okay, how could you take this right now and look at it? And so there's two broad ways you could look at it. One, you could say, okay, we could take what we have now. We have an audit committee, we have a school board, and we have an internal audit that we perform. And we also then have an interest in doing performance audits. Within each of those, I'll start with the performance audit side of it. You'll see numbers below that in that box at the very bottom of the page, 2, 5, 6, and 7. 2, 5, 6, and 7. So you look over there to you need to be on the left there, KP, yeah, and up a little bit so you can see so I don't know if you can fit it all in the page or not, but you can move it up just a little bit and get that bottom. There you go. That works. So on the left side, you see number 2 is performance, benchmarking, efficiency, effectiveness. 5 is program evaluation, 6 is risk assessment, and 7 is special projects. So you see on the one side, performance audit side, those would be kind of natural functions of that performance audit box, and that whoever that is, an individual or multi-individuals, whatever. On the right side, you see the internal audit. You see 1, 3, 4, 7. 1, the traditional financial audit, 3, waste, fraud, and abuse, 4, investigations, complaints, and 7 being special projects, because the special projects could be on either side. So those kind of functions would hang there. Then if you didn't want to have both those functions reporting to the board, you could bring in somebody else, or you could somehow reorganize so that you would have an auditor general position, which would be, we don't currently have this position, so it would be potentially a new position, and you would still have those other performance areas, but you'd have those 2 performance areas reporting into an overall position. Again, we've not made a recommendation. Those are just some basic ways of looking at this. The final comment that I would make is that we recognize that the major purpose, the major value of the audit committee for the board is to kind of provide an umbrella that the overall review and kind of monitoring of the system functions are occurring. Much like, I don't know, when I got on the public engagement committee, we didn't really have an umbrella to talk about community engagement. So we put together the that multi-page summary of all the different functions that we do to engage the public. Some of them are actually done by the Public Engagement Committee, some are done by staff, some are done by the budget chair, vice chair, et cetera. But there was a central place that you could go to see how we interact. And we have an annual plan, if you will, that we put together, the board approves, et cetera. So we looked at this audit committee function ultimately is owning this kind of overall plan and kind of having some broad supervision. And then from there you could, drill down as far as you wanted to drill down. For example, there's been some discussion on the committee and actually one Dr. Garza's, I don't know if it's a formal recommendation, but just an idea that she had about how we would do kind of equity and compliance. And she's considering whether or not that should be housed where it is. Maybe she would move it into the office of the general counsel. So would that still mean that they would report in detail to the audit committee? Well, probably not in detail, but there may be some kind of summary report because investigations that would go on, the audit committee would want to know at some maybe 30,000-foot level what's going on. There could be another function like program evaluation, which currently is in a separate shop and reports now to Marty Smith. Maybe that would also have a 30,000-foot level report. Or maybe, the school board wants to dig down a little, maybe it's only a 20,000-foot level. But there would be some flexibility in how those different positions would ultimately kind of connect to the board, and the board would have some overall review of that. Those are all really the kind of pieces that we were talking about, and I may have missed a few of them, and I'm going to give my colleagues a chance right now to see if they have want to add anything, either Janie or Megan, to conversation points that I made, and then I'll give Teresa and Chris an opportunity to do the same.
No, I thought, and we were very appreciative of having Sharon Bolova here this morning. It was very interesting. As we decide how we're going to structure this and use this, one of the things that is always, I think, a challenge is sort of the terms that we use. And one of the questions that I asked Sharon this morning is program. What did they mean by program? And she actually, and I asked her the health department, I thought it was a good example. I said, for us, a large part of what we do is looking at our children learning in the way in which we are hoping they are because of something that we've put in. And so for us, the program might be a third grade reading, whatever. And then you look at a longitudinal information on student achievement. And Sharon said, and then I said, well, like in the health department, do you evaluate the health department based on the health of citizens in the county? And she said, no. What they would look at, for example, is saying a drug program. If you can buy a drug that's a generic instead of a prescription, can they save money and they can use a generic instead of prescription? So that's the kind of work they would do, but that they wouldn't be, at least from their audit, they would not be evaluating whether or not citizens are healthier because of the services of the health department. So for better or for worse, it is when we talk about program evaluation, how we define program, and obviously we define it according to what our needs are. But as we're trying to get to an apples to apples, it's always important that we understand what we mean. We may use the same word, but in essence, it may mean something different when they actually get down to whatever it is they're going to do. So that's one interesting challenge. So
I will say I have really enjoyed the work this year on the audit committee, and I'm extremely excited about where we're headed with this. And as my audit committee members know, what has me most enthusiastic is when we have looked at other school systems who already know what this looks like and how to do it well. And I just sent you all a link with Palm Beach County's annual Inspector General report for 2013. And what you'll notice, if you even get a chance to just peruse it at some point, is they talk about their performance audits. And what is a performance audit? And that's basically providing objective analysis to assist in the management for the school board in using the information to improve program performance and operations, reduce costs, facilitate decision-making, and contribute to a public accountability. These objectives will include the assessment of the program's effectiveness, its economy and efficiency, the internal controls and compliance. And then we even talk about, the effectiveness has to do with measuring the extent to which a program is achieving its goals and objectives. Now, I heard something different from Janie when Sharon was talking with us. What she did say is they might right now have focused on financial audits and reviews, but she very much understood that as an educational institution, what we'll be doing in terms of our performance audits may look different from the county side. And I really am optimistic in believing that what we're looking at here and what I hope we can bring to all of you as a full board with Dr. Garza's collaborative efforts throughout is having a really good model that does reflect national best practices for our work that we want to do, which does include performance audits. But it's not a foreign concept. It does get done in school systems, and Palm Beach is similar in size to us, and so I think it's just an interesting model to look at. But I think this is going to be one of the best things that we can do moving forward for our board in terms of the working, again, and I want to emphasize this and then I'll be done. Sharon Bulova pointed out that the goal of this type of oversight is never to be adversarial. It is to be collaborative and to strengthen and improve the work that the county employees do with the board of supervisors and their auditor, and it would be the same thing for us, that it's our collaborative relationship between this school board and Dr. Garza and between the inspector general type structure and the school system that provides these programs. So I think next week when we can spend a little more time trying to bring something to all of you, but I would say if you have any doubts at all, look at the structure of these other school systems and look at some of the reports to get a sense of what it looks like. Just because it's new to us doesn't mean that this isn't best practices and a way to do this better.
Thank you, Megan. Dr. Garza, I want to give you an opportunity to speak as well, and then I'll go to Chris and Teresa.
I guess what I would say, based upon kind of building upon what Dan was saying earlier, is I think the essential piece of this work is really the plan, and the plan that the board adopts. And I think that I'm excited about the potential that we would develop, and you all would potentially approve an audit plan that is a little bit more comprehensive than what we've had in the past. It would have obviously the traditional audit functions, but it would also be the place where we would illustrate to the community the other things that we're looking at and working on, and it would keep us from being ad hoc on that work. But it would also help us be aligned. Maybe it's work that's happening somewhere else, but that influences kind of our audit work. So I think the important point of this, I think we'll find the best way to be structured for our time and our needs today. I think we still have some conversations ahead, but I think ultimately the most important piece of this work, structure is important, but I think the plan is really essential.
Thank you, Dr. Garza. Teresa, then Chris? No, Teresa? Okay. Chris, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a few comments. As we're thinking about this, and Megan and I have had a few conversations about best practices, and I think it's very helpful to think about what other school districts are doing. For me, I always think about audit standards first when thinking about best practices, and so a few comments about audit standards and what that might be, how that might be helpful for you as you consider these topics and these potential outcomes. One is the concept of independence. In the audit standards, independence has two facets. One of them is organizational independence. Where are you placed in the organization? What we see here with FCPS is that we have achieved the best practice in organizational independence, where the audit function is reporting up not just to the chief executive, but actually to the governing board. So that's the best practice. And both of the options that were put on the table here maintain that best practice. So that's good. The second aspect of independence has to do with arguably even more important, and that is independence of mind. And that has to do really with us as practitioners. How are we going to be independent of mind? How are we constantly checking ourselves? And how does the organization itself, the governing body that we report to, help to support that, maintaining that independence of mind? So please consider that as well as you think about the organizational structure and reporting relationships and all those things. How can we best achieve independence of mind for the audit function? And then finally, I want you all to think about accuracy, the accuracy of the information. Among the things that were laid out in the various practices that you've seen from the other school districts is this quality and compliance function. As Teresa pointed out, that is actually an internal function that helps to ensure that all of the work product that comes out of the audit office meets the highest standards, that it's consistently accurate, that it is consistently objective, that it meets all of these standards. Is something that we can all be proud to have come out of the organization. So that's my commitment to make sure that we're always going to have something that is of high quality. And as we think, further down the road, not just conversations for the next few weeks, but conversations over the next couple of years, what do we want to do to have the audit program and the audit function be something that is consistently independent of mind and putting out accurate and objective information?
Thank you, Chris. I think that's a great way to kind of go on to board members. Please let us know what your thinking is, and we're going to obviously be listening, and we'll be taking this back to hopefully formulate a kind of a final recommendation that we will then provide to all of you. I have a couple people that want to speak. Jenny, you want to touch?
I just wanted to say thank you, Megan, for forwarding the whole audit report from West Palm Beach. And I would recommend that people take a look. Have you looked at it? Have you opened it? Because it is very informative as to the projects that they take on. And they're very good projects, and they are really a lot of financial contracting performance, what have you. And I'm assuming that was what, because it's very good. Yeah, and it does describe what traditional auditing looks like.
Okay. I've got Pat, Ted, then Young. I got Pat first.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody, the audit committee and our wonderful staff for doing this for us. This feels like it's starting to make sense. I kind of know what I'm looking at and what our options are. I did have a few questions. I mean, I want to agree with Janie that I think that program evaluation is tricky for schools. And Chris, and you and I talked about this a little bit. Thank you for meeting with us individually. That was very helpful. Just because of the measures, and the only thing that might caution I would say is we want to make sure that whatever measures we use for student achievement are the measures we care about, so the portrait of a graduate, that all of this is aligned, including when we look at program evaluation. We don't want to be using SOL test scores for program evaluation if it's not what we're using to measure student achievement in a certain area. Do you know what I mean? So that's something that I'm concerned about. I don't know how much we would use student achievement as our measure, but there might be times when we'd want to. So anyway, did the audit committee think about, there are a few questions of whether the audit committee thought about it. Two questions. Let's start with this one. Audit committee, including community members on the audit committee. If you thought about pros and cons, could you share that with us? And then I also wanted to know if you thought about the auditor general position, any pros and cons. I know you said you didn't make a recommendation about that, and maybe I'm asking for too much information. And then finally, on the defining work, I look at it and I see the potential for overlap with our current OEs and other, reporting that we already get. And I'm not sure about whether we're expecting a duplication of effort, whether it's intentional, or what the issue is there. Thanks.
On the public member, that was really to hear the presentation from Sharon Bulova this morning, was to get a better understanding of the pros and cons of that. We've talked in general about it. I don't know that we have formulated a specific position, but it is definitely something that we are looking at, and it'll be part of our recommendation as to whether we do that or not, and why or why not. But I know that that's there. The position title, that's really what part of our discussion has been, auditor general or no. I mean, two separate reports. That's really what we're still wrestling with, and we're welcoming, looking for comments from the board as to what it might want. And the third item was?
Does overlap? Yeah. Defining the work. Right.
Right now, program evaluation sits completely outside of this work. And as we look at overall effectiveness as an organization, I don't necessarily think it would change what program evaluation is doing right now. It's just a matter of making it all really mesh and be a part and be really aligned with the direction of the audit committee. I think the bigger question about what are we measuring is something that is something different and sits outside. Would it affect our overall program evaluation cycle? Potentially. But I think the real goal here is to make sure that program evaluation, that cycle, is kind of overall part of the overall audit plan.
I'm sorry, just one more question, just like an example. The achievement gap, right? Let's say that's a goal. Let's say we say we want to evaluate our programs for how well we're doing, how well they're helping us close the achievement gap. I mean, where would that fit in this?
Right now, the program evaluation cycle is sitting out here, and I'm sure a lot of people have had some say in the development of that program evaluation. I think it's just now time for us to establish what are the most essential components of our system that we want to measure on an annual basis. And so, and I'm not disparaging the way it's been done in the past, because I'm sure it was done in just the way we needed it at the time. But I do think your point's a good one. Maybe that's mission critical, and that's what we want to spend our program evaluation time on, is looking at our achievement gap and what we're doing. Is it making a difference?
And I would see the audit committee's role only being at a very kind of 30,000-foot level, which is, if the board says, here are the 3 things that we want to make sure get evaluated, and obviously the superintendent's in the middle of that, and then the agreement is, yes, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, then that would be part of the overall reporting of the audit plan that we do, but we're not actually going to be doing the work. We're just going to be kind of the filter, not filter, I wouldn't say that. We're more the connection point for the board for that particular issue.
And we'll bring forward recommendations on all these pieces for you to vet, for you to either affirm or modify in some way.
Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Stork. This morning I was in the peanut gallery during the audit committee meeting, and I learned a lot. And the first thing I learned was what Chris just told us about the fact that our auditor reports directly to the school board. I was actually being persuaded by Mr. Harity that we had gone too far in removing our auditor from the superintendent. So that was very helpful for me to hear.
Sharon Bolova didn't really understand that this morning. Yes. So, and I think that's part of the misunderstanding that's out there in the community, which is kind of a shame. But.
Right. So without pointing fingers, I think I learned, a little to my surprise, that we're following best practice. Okay, and the supervisors have some decisions to make. The other thing I heard from Chris was that it's a very good thing to have members of the public on the audit committee. Now, in the context of a financial audit, you're looking for people who are CPAs and all that kind of stuff, whatever expertise they need. But I thought that was useful. And then in our discussion with Chairman Bolova, I thought it was quite fascinating, the line of questioning that Janie pursued, which had to do with how does the Board of Supervisors evaluate the performance of aspects of government that are highly specialized. And what emerged from that is that they audit the money side of that, but that they don't really seem to be, and I'm just going on what I heard, they don't really seem to be auditing the efficacy of the trash and landfill stuff or the health department or whatever it is, right? Whereas for us, that is a key function. The crux of the matter here is that we have, programs, educational programs, and where do you find the expertise to audit the educational programs? Well, obviously we have Ricardo Sockwell, right, and his team. Well, then I thought, well, do we bring that group under the school board? And I'm thinking, no, we don't want to go there, right? We don't want to keep bringing in that or the Office of Compliance and whatnot. So then I'm thinking, well, actually what we need somebody who does work for the school board, who has enough expertise to evaluate these evaluations and act as a tripwire and advisor to us that, maybe there's something we need to dig into. This report looks really sound. So how do you get to that expertise? And, I've often thought that person needs to be a retired superintendent. But I think if they're retired because they don't want to do this stuff anymore. And then I went back to this idea of the public being involved in an audit committee, because we've got tons of people around here, tons, who either professionally or out of just sheer passion have expertise to examine the reports that would come from the Office of Program Evaluation. So maybe one of the answers is that we augment the capability of our audit function, not necessarily by hiring people, but by finding members of the community who are qualified and have the passion to serve. So I'll just have one more thing, and then I'll be quiet so other people can speak. Regarding this here, I'm going to toss in my 2 cents. I think we have to be very clear about lines of responsibility. So the way I interpret this diagram, let's look at the top one, because that's closest to, I think, where I think. This suggests to me that the Auditor General is reporting to the Audit Committee, and I believe that is incorrect. The Auditor General must report to the school board. And then the Audit Committee, in my view, is an adjunct to the Auditor General, who oversees the work that has been assigned to the Audit Committee and approved by the school board. Okay, so that's my 2 cents, and thanks for giving me so much time.
Thank you. Young?
I'm okay now.
Elizabeth?
I think that he just got Jesus in terms of an auditor. I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to you about it afterwards and get, but not in terms of the auditor. I think I've decoded what you've said. So, I guess, Ms. Reed, I feel like so many times I channel you. What do you want from us at the end of this? Where are we going? Where are we going? Are we getting on the audit bus and are we going?
Whatever you want to give us, because what we're going to take from this is whatever comments you have, we're then going to sit down as a committee, put together our knowledge for the last year and make some sort of recommendation back to the board, and then the board can do whatever it wants to do with that recommendation.
No, I'm going to try to be very specific because I want to know what you want. What happens next? Are you going to governance and saying, this is what we're going to do? Are you going to, are you coming to all of us and getting a vote? And if so, when is that?
I'm sorry, I thought I was being clear, but let me be clearer. The board appointed an audit committee to do some work this year. Part of that work we've been doing all year, comprehensive risk assessment. The other thing was to obviously bring in, advocate and hired a couple auditors. We're now in our final steps of this year's work, which is to bring all this together in should there or should there not be any changes to our existing audit structure. And we've considered some things. I think we have some changes that we're going to be suggesting or recommending, but our work isn't complete because we needed to hear from Chairman Willis. So we're looking for you all to give us some feedback on what you've seen so far and any particular thoughts you have, because the next step is for us to meet what I hope is a final time, put together, if you will, a recommendation, send it to the board, and then the board can decide whether to act on it or not, or modify it or whatever.
So this is just before we put the final stages on our report, Audit Committee, if you have anything last to say, this is it, because the next time we're going to really see this is a vote.
No, next time you're going to see it is a specific recommendation from the Audit Committee to the board, which I assume we'll talk about in a work session, and that the board can then, ask
Now I
questions
feel like
about or whatever.
now I feel like I'm channeling Miss Smith. What do you
So-
want us to do?
So, I don't know, did you understand what I was saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I do. But we don't have the benefit of having done the amount of discussion that you've had. So I feel like, I guess we have to go away from this and maybe look at this and see if.
That's fine.
What we realized today is that we're going to have a change of some kind with our committee assignments. So in the event that happens, we wanted to be able to meet one last time before we go into the August recess to just finalize the work that the three of us have done. And then we would bring that recommendation to our chairman and vice chair with most likely recommendation of, here's not just the recommendation going forward, but we'd like a work session so we can, again, walk you through based on just this first introduction of it, here's what we recommended, and have that discussion so that ideally it then can become an action item for the board to vote on, especially if there's any positions involved.
If that's it, then my 30,000-foot input is, I've always believed we needed members of the public on the audit committee. And so whether it's something akin to what Chairman Bulva shared with us this morning, a couple of additionals, I think the audit committee ought to stay at least 3, if not 4, but 4 is hard, I know, to work our schedules, so maybe 3 is best. And looking forward to, how you guys pull that forward. I'm not sure that I agree with Ted that reporting to the full board works. I mean, you have to have, like, on the board supervisor side, the auditor reports to the audit committee, and then the audit committee turns around and gives, a report to the full board. I don't know if that works with our structure or not. That's the one thing that's a little bit hinky, but you guys, I guess have a greater amount of time to spend on that, so.
Thank you. Anybody else? Patty?
Well, as you know, I very much support this idea and am very impatiently hoping that we can bring it forward sooner as opposed to later. I do support the idea, and again, it's like Groundhog Day. I know we've talked about for quite some time the issue of having members of the public on the audit committee that would mirror the county side, so I very much support that. I support the auditor general concept, or whatever we want to call it, and have glanced through some of the other best practices we see. And speaking of best practices, Palm Beach, I notice their similar function, and they're similar in size, has 16 FTE. How many do you have, Teresa? 5.
So does the county, I believe. Their number's around 16 too. When you combine their external function plus all their internal, I think they have at least 16 people. Is that correct? I think I added up.
So that I would like to make sure that we talk about that, as well as the function is, how can we staff it up so that they can be successful in finding savings. Thank you very much for your good work in pushing this forward.
Well, we're not done yet, but we're close. We're very close. Anybody else? Dr. Carson?
I think it's also important, I know that we've had, for an entire, at least a year I've been here, there's been a lot of comparisons. People saying, y'all need to be more like the Board of Supervisors, and I know there's been a lot of conversation around that. What I have learned, kind of back to what you were saying, Ted, and some others, is actually, I think we're designed in many ways a lot better than our county, counterparts. They have their internal audit does report to Ed Long, but I believe if I asked the question correctly, they don't actually have an internal audit plan that's approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
Which I found very surprising. So in lots of ways, I think the audit committee's accomplished a whole lot this year, and I think this is important, final piece of kind of work. But I've learned that in many ways, they probably could we could turn the table. Maybe they need to be more structured, like, let's flip the conversation. that they in many ways could learn from us in terms of our audit function. What do you usually say, Ms. Schultz? Change the conversation?
Tammy?
I sat in the audit committee's work session the last time, and I was most impressed about the work that you guys have done during the year. And I thank the staff as well for, helping and guiding conversations. And I'm right on point with what Dr. Garza had said. I think the tables have absolutely turned. When we looked exactly, when we heard even today about what they did, and Ms. Weatherman, you said, if we kind of did that, you would give a big red stamp on and turn it right about, yes. So I look forward to, I think, Mr. Stork, that's the right plan, is to wrap up this year's hard work, come back to us with your final recommendations. There will be a new audit committee, but as I asked everybody today, please get your comments into me about where you'd like to serve in the following year, and if audit is your thing, I'm sure there'll be some people that would like to go off and some people would like to come on, but it's an exciting time to be on that committee and be part of it. And we'll have some excellent groundwork to go forward, and maybe even 97% of a plan, and then the last group gets its little mark, and then we go forward. So thank you all very much.
With that, I wanted to particularly thank Teresa for her work for the whole year, and Chris has really been a welcome addition, and I think has provided some other insights. Teresa and Chris, if you all don't know, we know that because we work with them on a daily basis. They are incredibly involved at the national level, and I forget the name of but it's a national audit committee group, and they are very involved and leaders in that group. They know best practices. They've brought those things here. They've helped to educate us along the way. I deeply support best practices, and I'm confident that people who understand what we're doing will greatly appreciate that we do a great job. And this will, I think, further add and finally give us the other piece of this that we haven't had. So I think we're all looking forward to that. So with that, this committee meeting is adjourned.
I have a next step.
Okay.
One more next step.
I'll just tell you what it is, that you're going to bring the recommendation to the board and the chairman will determine the meeting schedule.
Yeah, that's fine.
Correct.